And to celebrate this Halloween, why not talk about one of my favorite horror movies? But not just a horror movie, a superhero horror movie. After all, Darkman from 1990 is exactly this. Directed by Sam Raimi, the great director behind the Evil Dead trilogy, and also the Spider-Man trilogy, the first one with Tobey Maguire. As any of his movies, this one brings an unusual experience. Miles away from what we are used to with superhero movies nowadays, where everyone is built up as a brick, everybody can jump and do acrobatics with the aid of CGI, and above all, it must be part of a shared universe. Here things are very different. To watch Darkman today, it's a very refreshing experience. A very unique story with a superhero that is actually a monster, with elements from the Phantom of the Opera and RoboCop, which I will explain later. This is the kind of movie that no studio would make nowadays, because it doesn't fall in the category of spending millions to make a movie to receive billions in the box office as a guarantee return. No. Here, it's even difficult to understand why a studio financed such a project, only trusting the abilities of Sam Raimi. The story is very basic. You have Dr. Peyton Westlake, played by a young Liam Neeson before he became this vengeful old man that we know today. He's a scientist making experiments with synthetic skin, which means skin that will help burned victims. During his studies, he discovers that the skin doesn't last very long in terms of consistency. This has to do with the luminosity of the place that the studies are taking place. Then he discovers that through darkness, the consistency of the skin lasts much longer, hence the name Darkman that he will get later. In parallel, we also have the story of his girlfriend Julie, played by a young Frances McDormand, and she is a lawyer who is investigating a case of her own boss, a real estate developer called Louis Strack, who has a project to develop new buildings in the city, very tall, very beautiful, with the promise of demolishing a good chunk of the city as well. Plus, he is involved in some criminal deeds, including bribing some members of the zoning commission to develop this project. The problem is that the documents that prove his involvement with these criminal actions are in the lab of Dr. Westlake. This is when Strack hires a criminal gang to break into this lab and get the documents, killing anybody who is inside it. A gang led by the gangster Robert Durand, the great villain of this movie. And this is exactly what the gang does. They break into Dr. Westlake's lab, kill his assistant, and destroy the whole place, leaving a bomb that explodes the whole building, sending Dr. Westlake as a fireball into the air, until he falls in a lake nearby, becoming missing for a long time. This accident causes deep deformities in him, and when he is found and taken to a hospital where the doctors try a new procedure that gives the patient the ability of not feeling pain, this makes him much stronger and much more resistant to any pain. So as a classic horror movie monster, he escapes from the hospital and decides to rebuild his life in an abandoned factory, reconstructing a little of his old lab and a little of his experiment so he can become Darkman and plot his revenge. Like I said before, this character has elements of the Phantom of the Opera, especially because of his look, but also has similar elements to RoboCop. And what I meant by that is that we have similar plot elements like a villain that is a business tycoon trying to rebuild the city, and a criminal gang that has relations with him, including a leader that is pretty memorable. In there we had Clarence Boddicker, and here we have Robert Durand, who is a very peculiar villain because he has this lust of cutting his enemy's fingers and keeping for his private collection. By the way, the movie starts with the villain and his criminal gang in the middle of a negotiation with another gang that ends in an amazing shootout scene that has some tones in the style of the director John Woo. But not only the plot of the movie is similar to RoboCop, but also the idea of the hero here, because we have a character that is basically destroyed and resurrects to plot his revenge, something that makes him a very tragic character, that lost everything that he had in his past life, and he will probably never recover it again. In the case of Darkman, especially his girlfriend, Julie. And by the way, both were actually planning to get married before he was almost murdered. And this gives a very somber tone to the story, because we don't even have a happy ending. There's no return for Darkman from this condition that he has today. And the movie shows this very well, because as he is making his revenge, he starts to lose his human soul that he had before. So here we have a great counterpoint against RoboCop, because in that movie, RoboCop was trying to search his own humanity, and here Dr. Westlake has lost it completely. And he even tries to recover it, because this whole idea of the skin that he builds gives him the ability of transforming into other people. So not only he uses it for this purpose, but he tries to return to the identity of his old self using a mask that has his old appearance. So he tries to get Julie back, tries to get back with her, but the hate that has taken over his heart, unfortunately, it made him a full monster. In one of the best scenes of the movie, he takes Julie to a carnival park so that they can talk and get back together. But once he sees an aberration circus nearby, the words and the image of the aberrations trigger a huge hate in himself, because he knows he is an aberration as well. So all this section of the tragedy and the drama of the character is very well explored. But what about the action, since we are talking about a superhero movie? And this is where we get in the direction of Sam Raimi, because I always say that he is one of my favorite directors, because his camera movements and shots are absolutely insane. To the ones who know his filmography since Evil Dead, the first one from 1981, knows that he has a very peculiar style that fits very well with the trash cinema. Like I said, this is a guy who his shot, his camera movements, his editing are done in such an insane way that all contributes very well to the energy and the dynamics of the scene. And for those who pay more attention to this kind of stuff, this style makes our eyes become glued to the screen to see which new trick he's going to use next. In his older movies from the decades of 80s and 90s, including Darkman, he wasn't afraid of using these over-the-top and sometimes even ridiculous techniques to give this energy to the scenes. And this works very well in Darkman. In the main action scene of the movie, that is, the hero holding to a helicopter through a rope, and the helicopter takes him flying through the city, passing by the buildings, even colliding with the facade of one of them. It's absolutely spectacular, not only by the creativity of all the shots, but for example, he even uses speed-up images with the camera to give much more dynamic to the whole thing, to the point of getting a little ridiculous, but this is the purpose. Sam Raimi is a huge fan of the Three Stooges, especially because of their dynamic in scene, because there was always something happening in each one of them. And Sam Raimi has this very specific style that he even took to other movies in his career later, including the Spider-Man trilogy. Who doesn't remember the Dr. Octopus scene where he kills many doctors in the hospital once he wakes up? But the most fascinating is that he has a very versatile career. And excluding some movies that I don't like, he actually directed many different kinds of genres since the beginning with The Evil Dead. So you start with this very trash horror with The Evil Dead, then you have number 2, then he moved to the superhero genre with Darkman, then he moved to Army of Darkness, that is, the third Evil Dead, and a medieval action movie, which is awesome. Then he moved to a western with The Quick and the Dead with Sharon Stone, then he moved to very different genres, like for example, A Simple Plan, which is a suspense story in the style of the Coen brothers. In fact, the Coen brothers are great friends with Sam Raimi, hence the fact that Frances McDormand, who is wife of one of the brothers, is in Darkman. Then he moved to a sports movie with For the Love of the Game, which is a baseball movie with Kevin Costner. Then he moved to another suspense movie called The Gift in 2001 with great cast including Cate Blanchett and a villain in Keanu Reeves. By the way, believe it or not, a great performance from Keanu Reeves. Hey, I love Keanu Reeves, alright? So believe it or not is not an offense. Till he finally arrived in the Spider-Man trilogy. So the guy actually proved himself in all these genres, and in all these movies that I mentioned, he uses a little bit of his style, originating from the Evil Dead since the beginning with his crazy camera. Not only this, but his unusual humor that comes from this influence of the Three Stooges, it's also always present, including in Darkman, that not only has this very dark and tragic tone, but has many great funny scenes as well, especially in the plots where he disguises himself as the gang members of Durand and creates intrigues inside it, making the villain kill some of them without knowing that they are actually an imposter in Darkman. And he even incriminates Durand in one scene that he disguises as the man in a negotiation with another gangster, but is actually an imposter. Then the real Durand arrives and both of them stumble on each other in a revolving door of the building. Then one of the Mexican members of his gang delivers a great classic line, "Dio mío, ¿qué se pasa?" So this is a movie that has everything you like in this kind of genre. Great action scenes, of comedy, and also of horror, because this character is pretty scary on itself. And the makeup of Darkman's disfigured face is one of the best and most layered I have ever seen in any character until today. The most interesting is that as the movie progresses, his real look is revealed gradually. But in the end, when it is fully revealed, Sam Raimi doesn't hesitate in showing us it in the daylight, with the muscles, some parts of his skull being shown through open gaps of the meat. It's pretty grotesque, but fantastically well done. And again, another element that makes it very bold for the time. It's a superhero movie that should be more remembered nowadays. There were 2 sequels that went straight to TV, and they suck, in my opinion. We have the actor that played the mummy in the movies replacing Liam Neeson in them, but I think there could be a proper sequel to the movie, of course, if it has the collaboration of Sam Raimi in some capacity, something that these sequels didn't have. So much so that this is an original character created by him, and the original idea was to adapt the character The Shadow from the comics, but he didn't have the rights to do it, so he decided to create his own superhero, and he did a perfect job with it. By the way, there were also comics with the Darkman character, including him meeting and facing Ash from the Evil Dead. And I haven't read these comics, but I sure will, because this idea is sensational. And this is Darkman from Sam Raimi. What do you think? Have you watched it? Do you like it as I do? I remember watching it as a kid when it was on TV, and to be honest, I wasn't afraid of him. I even liked his tragic story and the action scenes, so there you go. A great option if you want to watch a refreshing superhero movie that comes from this horror genre. And this is it. Once again, thank you so much if you watched this video so far. If you like the content of Trashing with Gus, where we talk about horror movies, action movies, trash movies, animations, and animes, please do me a favor. Leave your beloved like in this video and your amazing subscription so we can keep trashing forever, alright? See you in the next trashing video, and bye bye.